Welcome. So you're here for the, well, let's share my screen so I know exactly what one we're here for. You're here for the driver training and driver examiner training and education management system. And the purpose of this little presentation here is to help us to become more standardized in our examiner training so that we are giving the same test to every student who takes a road test here in Utah. I know that it's not exactly the same because they're in different cities, they're in different places with different roads and different cars with different instructors, but we have quite a few things that we can have be the same. So we're just going to talk a little bit about that and then walk through some problems we have had with people entering things into DEMS or the driver education management system in not exactly a wrong way, but in a way that makes things a little bit harder. So we're going to go through some of those things. Okay, and I'm attempting to manage my chat, so feel free if you need to let me know. Franklin, it looks like you said maybe my volume's not low and not high enough. Do I still need to work on my sound volume? Okay, if I do, let me know. All right, so my first question here is inter-rater reliability. What is inter-rater reliability? Have any of you ever had any training on inter-rater reliability before? Or have you even heard the phrase before? You can answer me in chat, or I don't know if you're allowed to unmute your microphone, but all right, so it looks like a lot of you have not heard about it. Eric, it looks like you've heard about it before. Did you hear about it in AP testing by chance? Yeah, a lot of standardized tests do come. So I'm looking in the chat if you're able to open that and look at that. Eric learned about it in his master's degree. A lot of standardized tests are, if they are rated by a human, then there has to be some inter-rater reliability. And that's kind of what we're talking about. When we give a assessment or a test or an exam to a student, if it's a standardized type of test, we want to make sure the score is the same for every student, regardless of whether they're in my car or if they're in Joseph's car or if they're in Sam's car. And one of the ways we can do that is by using a rubric. Yeah, Joseph, you talked about that. Actually, I don't know if it was Joseph. Oh, let me go back. But one of the ways that we can do that is by practicing to look at the same thing and give the same score for the same reason. And rubrics do tremendously help with that. Also, practicing helps with that. So the other presentation I'm giving is about mentoring driver education teacher candidates, people who are coming up on their student teaching and they're going to go out and drive with kids with another instructor. They're going to teach in the class with another instructor. I call them kids, but they're adults. They're teachers who already have their license. But one of the things that they need to be practicing is this inter-rater reliability piece. So they need to see other people give tests to student drivers and see what they're needing to look for so that we can make sure we've done everything correctly. Let's see, let's go to the next slide. So we talked about what it is. It's making sure that we're all giving the assessment and scoring the rubric in the same way. Now for us, the rubric is that testing sheet, that examiner's sheet that we get from the driver license division. That's required by Utah state law to be the only thing that we use to test our students. We can't create our own. We can't change that document. We're supposed to use the same one. So that's going to be very helpful for us so that we're all looking at the same document. We're all going to use that same thing to score and to grade. Why is inter-rater reliability important? Especially in a driver education car type setting. So kids are being rated the same way. Good, thanks, Eric. Anybody else have some opinions on that? Fairness, Jeremy? Uniform, we get to know what to expect. Yeah, good, there's some good things being said in that chat box. Consistency and safety on the road. Yeah, so our test that we give students in the public school, we're allowed to do that because the driver license division gives us the authority to do so. But our test is kind of the gatekeeper. And if we have a kid who is not tested the same as a kid in another school and their scores are not comparable, then we may be putting unsafe drivers out on the road. And our test is that gatekeeper to keep students who are not yet ready to go out on the road from going out on the road by themselves and possibly causing a collision. Yeah, uniform and consistent. As I'm looking in the chat, I'm seeing a lot of really great things. So we got some test ethics to talk about because really inter-rater reliability is connected to testing ethics. Whenever possible, we should not be driving our own students. Joseph Woodward asked a good question in the chat. He says, do we get much argument about scores on this from students? Probably not, but where we do get problems with is when we're looking at our oversight from driver license division, from Utah State Board of Education, from our own district coordinators and directors on down. Where we get into some trouble is when we start to see one student who was tested by one teacher at one school and then another student who was tested at another school, and the students report back to us that they took completely different tests. For example, I remember when I was doing my own student teaching in driver ed, I was driving with one teacher for a few weeks, and then I was driving the back seat with another teacher for a few weeks, and they were wildly different in the way they tested their students. One of them didn't do every drill every day, and so when it came to the test, the kids were not prepared and ready for it. And I don't even recall that they did all of the drills for that student's test. Another road instructor was fantastic and drove every drill every day. And the kids were ready for that on test day, and they drove every drill for every test. So anyway, we have a lot of flexibility and a lot of variability. So we're just gonna go over this real quick. Whenever possible, instructors should not drive their own students. What that means is you shouldn't be driving your own kids. First of all, we know that as a teacher, it's not really ethical for us to drive our own children. But then it's also not really, ethical is not quite the right word I want to use here, but it leads to the possibility of a biased test when we test the students that we train. So the current understanding of the way that the Utah State Code is written for us is that we need to not test students that we train behind the wheel. If you're at a school where you legitimately are the only driver ed instructor, Audra will work with you and there's a way around that. But like at my school, we got 6 drivers that can, you know, any of the other 5 could test a kid that I had trained. It does require putting in some effort into your program to create the schedule so that a kid knows, okay, I'm going to go to simulator, to range, to road training, and then I'm going to road test. And that can be problematic if you have not been doing this in your school. I'll be honest, and I think this is a different change that is relatively new in terms of its understanding, because we've had different memorandums of understanding in the past on how this goes. But this is the current reading of the current Utah State statute. And so we want to make sure we follow that. Oh, okay. Then we only want to allow students 2 different tests. Whether it's the written or the road test, they should only be allowed to take it with us twice. If the student needs more times than that, or they need some kind of an accommodation, they can go and take the written test at the driver license division and get accommodations that we cannot give them. Okay, so if the student comes to you and they want to take the written test and they can't pass it in 4, 5, or 6 times, they need to go home and they need to study a little bit more before they come back and try again. And they should go to the driver license division at that point and take their written test. If it's a road test, we really are only allowed to test them twice. And I think we've known that for quite some time, but there's a change this year where we're asking that schools not give an unlimited number of attempts on the permit test. If your student has trouble with reading, or if they have trouble with various things on a test that they need some accommodation for, the driver license division is allowed to give accommodations that we are not. Make sure you're not giving any kind of accommodations. You're not allowed to read the test to the kid. It is not a timed test, so they can have as much time as they need. You're also not allowed to allowed to interpret the test into another language. It needs to be taken in English. Oh, so I just went over that, sorry. And then when you're when you're administering written tests, oh, I've already gone over that, duh, sorry. Okay, I'm gonna continue. The examiner's course, there's a new one, brand new one that has been written by a partnership between Utah Driver License Division, Utah State Board of Education, and OnQ Safety. It's gonna be coming out in the next couple of weeks, I believe. Audrey will give you more information, look for an email on that. And then this is separate and different from any DLD examiner's training that you've had in the past. And Audrey will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe as soon as it's ready, she's going to send it out to all of us, and all of us have to take it this year. And then it has to be retaken every 5 years. That's part of your driver training endorsement on your teaching license. There's some other things that have changed on our license renewal over the last little bit, and hopefully that's been gone over either earlier in this conference, or it will be shortly with the law and policy training. But you want to keep your CPR certification active as well, and then you have to get professional development every year. That's not necessarily part of it's part of your license renewal, which I just did this year, so I kind of know how that works. But Audrey's also looking for it to be done annually. So you can't accumulate your 8 hours over the 5 years your license is good for. You have to accumulate that 8 hours, I believe it is, every year. Okay. Then we got some best practices for our training. We want to train our kids for our tests. So I would encourage you all to train on every drill every time. Every time you take a kid out, do as many of the drills as you possibly can in as many different situations as you possibly can. Increase your complexity of traffic over time. So they shouldn't be seeing a busy road on the first day of their training, but they also shouldn't be seeing a busy road on their test day for the first time. They should be seeing, residential to getting bigger, getting busier, getting more complex over the course of time. But doing the drills once and then expecting the kid to be able to do it perfectly on their test day is probably not a good idea. You want to thoughtfully plan your routes that allow for practicing of all of the drills. So in the past, I have driven with a lot of instructors, and some of them really carefully and thoughtfully plan out their routes. They say, okay, I know I'm going to turn here. I know this is where we're going to go. This is a place where I know I can parallel park. And then others are just kind of go with the flow. I'm not sure where we're going today. As long as you have a route that you can modify, construction happens, roads close, time gets different. It takes longer for a kid to do something than another. But you should have a good, thoughtful plan on where you're going to take the kids for both training and for testing. For example, I have one neighborhood I really like to use for testing because it's close to a multi-lane road, so we can go out and do some lane changes and get onto some higher speeds, but it's also really close to a neighborhood where I know I have a hill and a place I can parallel park. So I have that neighborhood that I use for my testing, and I can get tests done in about 15 or 20 minutes max every time. Where if I didn't plan that route very well, I might not be able to get it done as quickly as I could if I had it planned. And then we would like to encourage you to give feedback to the student every single time they drive, not just in the final test document that we give them when we're all finished, but give them feedback on what they did well, what they need to improve on, so that they can be ready on test day and actually have some improvement happen over the course of their drives with you. And then if possible, communicate that feedback back to the parents so they know what they need to work on with their student, whether that's on a piece of paper, or whether that's in an email, or whether that's in some kind of software program that you want to use. This kind of feedback is very helpful, especially for our students who are really not quite yet ready to finish their driving training and go out on the road on their own. I've had a number of parents very happy that I've given them good feedback. I have a sheet that I give them that I can share with you once I've done some editing to it. It's Lone Peak branded, but where the drill is listed out, the steps of the drill are listed out, and I mark where they have some trouble with. And then the parent can know to go and practice with them. All right, driver education management system. So that's kind of it for my examiner's part of this, because we're going to all be able to take the examiner's course here shortly. But I want to get into DEMS for a few minutes, and then I want to actually open it up to questions. I think I will pause right here and open it up to questions for you as well, if you have any questions about what we've talked about so far. Yes, Sharon, I will make sure to provide that to Audra, and then she'll plan on sending it out to everybody. We're going to try and give you a couple of different feedback forms. So anybody have any questions for me about what we've talked about so far? Programs for signing kids up for drives. Audra, do you want to handle that?
Yeah, I've been answering the questions in the chat box, so if anybody has, hopefully they made sense. Scheduling software. We just made state contracts with 2 different scheduling software companies. Dubinet is one of them, and Driver's Ed Solutions is the other one, so you can choose which one you want. You will do the contract with them and set up the program with your own schools, and then get reimbursed through our reimbursement program for them. So unlike Mineo, where we did the contract and set up the contract and paid Mineo directly, it's set up differently now. We did the contract for the schools on behalf of the schools, and the schools will set up, because I didn't want to choose what software company that you wanted. Those were the only 2 companies that went through the review and got approved. So that's the reason why you only have those 2 choices. So those 2 are available. If you want more information, email me, and I can give you the information on how to contact them. And it's kind of like Street Smarts, where they charge you per license per student that enters into the scheduling software. And then once they send you a bill, you would just put it in for reimbursement through the state. So it's at no cost to you. So if you want to start using scheduling software, that's what it's for the students to schedule their drives, their classrooms, their tests, all that kind of thing. There was a question about CPR and first aid. Those need to be current all the time now while you're teaching. The new licensing rules, there's a lot of different ones that came out. I'm going to be going over law and policy on Wednesday, but those have to be current and stay current now. It's not just a one-time thing. And there are certain vendors that you have to use. There's a huge list of them. There's no way that you can really pick a non-vendor. Just the popular ones are fine.
Yeah, I actually would encourage you to talk with your principals and directors at the district level, and encourage them to they can create a class for all driver ed teachers at their school or their district for CPR and first aid, and pay for it, and then get reimbursed by Utah State Board of Education. If you go out and do it all by yourself, you can't get reimbursed by Utah State Board of Education, but the school districts can. So we're working with our school here, and eventually with our district, to try and provide that driver education CPR specific training, so that teachers don't have to pay for it every 2 years. And it's just like on a rotation with the coaches. And then the driver education coordinator at our district would submit that for reimbursement from Audra. Audra, we have a couple of questions to put the software scheduler names in the chat box, and then to send a list of vendors for CPR out when you get a chance, maybe in the next newsletter. Joseph asked a question about if there are any sizable districts that defer their testing to the DLD. And as far as I'm aware, there are none in Utah that defer all of their testing to the driver license division. The driver license division doesn't want us to do that. They would have to hire a significant number of additional employees if we chose to do that. Now, once a kid is tested with you once and not done well, failed their test, retrained and retested with you again, then you can send them to the driver license division. You'll have to do their additional testing. And then somebody asked, William, I don't parallel park with kids until they've had some time. Yeah, it's fine. I set up cones. When I have a kid that scares me to death, I set up cones and I have them practice with the cones, or I go back to my range. That's fine. You don't have to practice with them on the road. It's also okay for you to simulate parallel parking when you're testing if you legitimately cannot find a place to do it with cones or trash cans or whatever else might be available. I've had to use those big curbside trash cans before because I can't find anywhere close, and I'm not going to drive around for 20 minutes trying to find a spot to parallel park. You can also simulate parking on a hill because not all cities have a hill within a reasonable radius of where the cars are being driven. We got some more questions. Can we use the CPR first aid class the coaches use? As far as I'm aware, yes. So if you're already a coach, you're probably covered. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So most of your schools are already having CPR and first aid classes for your coaches and your PE teachers because they have to keep theirs current all the time too. So just jump on, find out what they use and when they're having their courses and have them at the same time. And there's all different kinds of funds through the state where those courses are no cost to you.
Heidi, you asked a good question in the Q&A about schools that only have one instructor within the 60 miles. Audra will work with your school so that you don't have to have kids drive an obscene number of hours to get to another instructor. There's just a little bit of, checking in with you, making sure that we're giving an unbiased test to those kids. Okay, I'm going to go back into our PowerPoint, and we're going to talk a little bit about, we got another question in chat, bad weather simulation. Franklin, can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean with bad weather simulation? Utah State driving test doesn't require students to drive in bad weather. If you happen to have the students in your car while you're getting bad weather, it's a great place to teach them. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten stuck because a kid does exactly what I asked them not to do in the snow. But you can talk through parking uphill in bad weather. That would be just fine. You could have them practice it. I don't know that you'll be able to make the pavement wet or create snow, but you're welcome to walk through them. Any kind of inclement weather thing you might want to talk about. For example, I talk about not stopping in the dip of a driveway, because if you stop with your wheel in that dip, you're stuck. Like, you're going to be stuck. So it's good to talk through those kinds of things. I also ask every kid that's driving with me if they're going to drive a manual, if they know that they're going to drive a stick shift or not. If they are, then I'll talk with them about some specific things that pertain to a manual. We talk about it in the driver ed class a little bit, but yeah, Barry, is it okay to walk them through a test during bad weather? It is my understanding, as long as you are not telling them how to do a drill, that if you need them to change behavior because of bad weather, that it's okay to give them some instruction on that. So for example, we're coming up to a stop line. I might tell them, don't stop in the ditch. Don't stop where the road dips down, because we'll get stuck. As far as I'm aware, that would be acceptable.
Allison, hold on for 1 second. Colton, can you bring Tara Zamora up to be a presenter person so she can speak?
Yep, I'll do that right now.
And then have Tara answer that question. She's from the driver's licensing office.
Perfect.
Good afternoon. I guess I'm presenting now. Thanks, Audra.
Tara, did you hear the question about what to do about testing in bad weather?
Yeah. So if you're going to test in bad weather, a lot of times we will stop testing in bad weather if we think it's going to be a dangerous situation, because we just don't know what is going to happen with that student. I think at this point, remember, if you're testing, you are no longer instructing and you're no longer giving any kind of instruction other than where you want them to go. So if you've taught them, Allison, giving your example, if they're going to go into the dip, I wouldn't tell them not to go into the dip, because you're now testing. if you've taught them that in the past, they should know not to go into the dip in the snow, if that makes sense.
So we just need to teach them those things before we start testing them.
That's correct, yes. So, but yeah, you can, or if it's going to avoid an accident or something like that, we want you to step in and definitely do that. We don't want anybody at risk, but we don't want to give any kind of clue that what they're doing on how to modify that driving until you're done. You can give them that after the fact, because that's where you want to teach them, because this is their last chance. Because if they pass, they're not going to have you there to say, don't stop in the dip, or be careful, you're going to hit that car, kind of a thing. We want to know that this is their last chance to know that they can really do it without you, if that makes sense.
It does. So Eric asked a question in the Q&A. How do we know for sure it was taught if we aren't testing our own kids? I think that we could agree as a department within our schools, you know, with other people who are going to be testing or teaching our kids, what are we going to make sure that they know? And then if it is bad weather, before you get in the car, I don't think this would be inappropriate. Tara can tell me if I'm wrong, but before you get in the car, you could review the things that would apply to that current set of inclement weather. And then they could get in the car and start their test and we'd be okay. It's not like you're teaching them on the road. You're just reviewing with them. Okay, if it's snowing, where do we stop? Or where do we not stop?
To add to that, one thing to keep in mind is that you guys are instructors for a lot of what you do, but at this point you're a tester. You're no longer teaching them. So if you go back to think of what a driver's license examiner is doing when they get in the car with the driver, they don't know what they've been taught. So they have a very set of guidelines that they go through. And if they don't know how to do it, then they don't get the point. They get the points assessed for that maneuver. So you can go over the maneuvers you're going to do, ask if they have any questions, and answer any questions that they have. If that means going step by step through the maneuver before you leave, that's perfectly fine. You know, we want to give
that
them
is very
pass.
Yeah, that's very helpful to know. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So, and then I read a comment. It's hard to cancel at 6 a.m. Yeah, we all have those situations, but yeah, we have to do it too. We have class at least open at 8, and sometimes we have road tests at 8:15. So you just do your best when you run into those situations.
Yeah, agreed. Okay, Kurt, in our Q&A, if we are the only driver ed teacher in our school, we have to find someone else to road test. Okay, this is a question that's come up a couple of times. If you are the only road tester at your school, talk to Audra directly, and she will have some clarifying information for you. That only applies to a small handful of schools, and it hopefully won't be any kind of a big deal. She'll accommodate that. She'll find a way to deal with that. But we want to try and improve our anti-bias training so that we're not giving the kid a benefit of the doubt when maybe they shouldn't have passed that test. I think that's happening a little bit. And so we want to make sure that that's just not happening.
Yeah, like Tara said, I mean, you guys are now a tester. No, you're no longer a teacher. You're not an instructor. There's a complete difference, and there needs to be a separation between the two. If you're the only instructor at your school, which is only going to be a few of you, send me an email and I will go through the different steps that you'll need to take to prevent this, for how you can change from being a instructor to a tester. So reach out to me, send me an email.
Okay, so if we're ready, I'm going to go on to DEMS real quick, and I'm going to try and make it short. If a student has a permit, they are findable in DEMS. You should not be entering name, birth date, first and last name into DEMS and creating a new student record unless that student does not have a permit. So I'm going to walk through some screenshots here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Unless you are entering that written test, don't create the new record. And then I have, on this presentation, I put a link to DEMS, but you've hopefully all seen it. So you're going to go to your login screen. You're going to type in your name. Once you are logged in, if you work for more than one school, be sure to select the company for which you are currently entering data. Occasionally, we'll have a teacher who is entering data for school A when it's really a student from school B, and that can be problematic. You just want to make sure you're in the correct company. And some of this is going to be like, I already know this, I don't need to listen to this, but there are some people who are brand new driver education teachers who've never used DEMS yet or who are still in their program becoming a driver education teacher. And so I want to go through these for them. I got a question. Is there a video that shows how the road skills test should go? Yes, that will be part, I'm going to answer this live. There we go. Nathan, there will be a course that you have to take. It's a 1-credit course. It's part of your relicensure for driver ed. You have to take it every 5 years. It's going to be released in the next couple of weeks, but it will show how a road skills test should go. It will give you examples. It will give you all of the details that you need. And then if you have further questions about very specific things, you can contact Tara, or is Sharon still at Driver License Division, Audra?
Yeah, she is. So we have people that you need to reach out to specifically for DEMS questions or driver licensing questions. And then if you have the questions like Nathan just brought up, or training questions, or need to remove or add somebody from DEMS, you can reach out to me for that. Or if you need to take the test, reach out to me. But if it's a DEMS specific question, or you're having issues with something not working in DEMS, you need to reach out to the driver's licensing office. Not the people that work at the driver's licensing DMV. They don't know anything about DEMS. You need to actually specifically reach out to Sharon or Coulter in DEMS, and I can give you those emails or those phone numbers. If you call the DMV office, they're not going to know how to help you.
Yeah, I have Sharon Harwood's email at the end of this presentation for you all. Nathan, the specific question you're asking there is actually addressed in the Driver License Division Examiner's Handbook. It talks about needing to pull over to the right side of the road and back up in a not busy place. I will also share that handbook if anybody wants it with you when we're finished with this. Debbie, do I need to take the examiner's test if my district doesn't offer the road skills examination?
Let me answer that.
Yeah, go ahead, Audra.
You need to take it because now there's not 2 separate licenses. Your endorsement license now is also contains your being able to do exams and to have that training. So there's not a separate license. So everybody will be trained on how to do a road skills test for your endorsement requirement. So yes, even though you don't test, you have to know how to test.
Yeah, once you're endorsed, you're able to do the whole thing. And that's one of the problems we have with students who are going through the program right now is they'll say, why do I have to do this? I'm only a tester. Or why do I have to do this? I will never teach in the classroom, or I only teach in the classroom. Once you have that endorsement, you can do it all. So we've got to make sure that you know how to do it all and that you're legally prepared to do it all. Okay, so you go into DEMS, you're going to search for student. You're going to start by hitting the query button right here, and you're going to enter their driver's license number. That's really their permit number, and you're going to hit submit. Once you do that, it will either bring up this kind of a screen that says, cool, the student's been found, and here's their name, and here's all that information, and are they linked? That's an important question. We got to pay attention to whether or not a student is linked. If that's the student you're looking for, you're going to click on their name. If they are not found, then you are going to not hit add a new student yet. You're going to go back to query, and you're going to type in their driver license number, and you're going to click on find by driver license number. That will solve the problem with us having duplicate records for students. I have a screenshot in a little bit that will show you the same student has 2 records in DEMS because their classroom was a teacher in a different company, our East Shore Online program, and their road instructor didn't follow this process to get those 2 records connected. So you got to search by driver license number, and then their record should pop up. Okay, so if it says license found, you need to update the student record, hit OK. And then it will bring up, again, the same looking screen, but now it has names in those boxes. It has their driver's license number in there. And the active date is whatever date their DEMS record was created. So it might be that day. It might have been a week ago, whatever. If the active date doesn't automatically populate, just put in that day's date and it'll be fine. And then you make sure you hit save. Always hitting save. Make sure that they've been linked. Now, this is what it looks like when a student has two records in DEMS. It's the same student. One of them is linked to my school and one of them is not. So if the student is not linked to my school, when I click on that student's name, it will bring up a screen that looks like this. And there will be a link button down here by the save button and the find driver license button. If you see that link button, click it and then hit save. Okay, there's a whole bunch of things happening in the chat panel. I will come back to that in a minute. It looks like it's asking about the endorsement. Saw a video on the DLC website. It only took them 10 minutes. Yeah, it does only, the road tests do only take between 15 and 20 minutes. If they can, Tom asked the question, how do we justify that long of a test when they can meet the requirement in 10? If they can meet the requirement in 10, cool. That means you have a good plan. You don't have to drive in between a lot. If they can't meet the requirement in 10 minutes, it's probably because you're putting a lot of space in between parallel parking and 3-point turns and a right turn and a left turn. Okay, I'm going to Steve's question. Why does the student not show up in the first query when they have a permit? Well, that's fascinating. I don't know. But I do know that we're working with two separate systems. DEMS is only for driver education instructors. The DLD doesn't really use DEMS. They use a different system. And so by us querying for find by driver license number, we're connecting their permitting system to the driver education and student management system and creating a link. When we used to use the SDC, those two were connected. I don't know how or why, but I know that this time they're disconnected. So we have to find by driver license number in order to bring the kid who's got their permit into our driver education management system.
Allison, can I address that a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, this is Tara. The reason that we cannot provide the license number is because that is part of personal identifying information that cannot be released. So by you providing it from the customer and putting it in DEMS and syncing it, it's a security feature. So it goes out, it looks at driver's license database, says, yes, confirm that that really is that person's license number and their name, and sends it back to you.
Perfect.
Otherwise, we can't just give that number out. It would be like you going and putting your license number in DEMS for everyone to see. And I don't think, not everybody's going to love that.
Yeah, I get that. And it's just it's a little quirk because when we did have the SDC, we could type in the permit and it would just automatically go find it and bring it in. But this one has an extra security feature, which I appreciate. And all we need to do is remember to click on find by DL number. We went away from the SDC. Tara, do you want to answer that? Why we went away from SDC?
It was a very old system and it wasn't tracking training very much. This is a newer system. It's got newer security features on it. And it's much more up to date so that you guys have it's cleaner, and then it's not as we weren't getting any reports or anything off the old SDC system, and it was no longer supported. So we had to go something completely new.
Yeah, this one was created in Utah for Utah. So they're also able to search by specific things in DEMS, which in SDC, they couldn't search for various things like they can with this one, which is some of why it's a little clunky on the teacher side because we have to go to different screens where SDC, it was very simple and it was a short process, but it's much more user-friendly for our friends at the driver license division, which I appreciate because that's what they're working in all day, every day. Yeah, Cody Christensen, we didn't have that information when we were first trained on this. I'm not sure that feature was original to DEMS, the find by driver license number. I know there's been quite a few adds and changes as we have given feedback to the driver license division and they've given that feedback to the people who build the program. There have been some changes made and I think there's going to be a couple more changes that are coming up. For example, right now we are only able to put in one road test and one permit test. If the kid fails it, we can't enter that. At the beginning of the pandemic, there were some problems with at least one parent who had some questions about their student and they wanted to know some different information about how many, they meaning the legislature later, wanted to know some information about how many students are failing their road tests the first time. High schools don't have a way to collect that data, so we actually don't know. But there, you know, we can get anecdotal evidence, or we can get evidence from school by school, but there's no central database where we can go and say 12% of students who took their road test failed it the first time in Utah public schools. So we're going to probably see continuing tweaks and changes to DEMS, and we'll continue to provide, I hope, good training that will show you screenshots of what things look like. Yeah, Randy, I think we were all told at the very beginning not to look up by the driver license number too. And so again, it just is going to change over time. All right, so once you've hit the link button, you're set and ready to go to enter their data. So we've clicked on training completion, and you're going to click on the add button, and it's going to let you put in their training type, their instructor, and their completion date. One little trick I've found is if I hit the tilde sign twice, then it will auto-populate with today's date, which is nice. Then I don't have to type anything in. And then make sure you hit save. And you can go back and put in all three or whatever it is that you're entering. So for this particular student, they had me for their behind the wheel and observation, another teacher for their classroom. Once they have all three of those things, then their training is all done. To enter a road test, you're going to click on the exams tab, and then you're going to enter in, push the add button. Enter in the requested information. Make sure that it says regular operator road and not written. The written test is the permit test. And then make sure you put in all of the information that's required. So the asterisks are required information, the start time, end time, vehicle, route number. That stuff's not required for us. Remember, this program is used for both public and private commercial driving schools. So there's some information that's optional for us and other information that's not. And then you're going to hit the save button, and you're going to get the opportunity to give them I'm not sure what that screenshot's for. I apologize. You're going to get the opportunity to give them a completion document. So you click on student, and then it's going to take you back to where their name and their permit number and everything was. And you're going to click on completion certificate. When you do that, it'll generate a PDF that looks like this. And you're going to sign it and send it with the student. Now, I don't typically send these with my students. I was asked if I can put the DEMS as a full screen. I'm sorry, I can't because they're screenshots from my computer, but I can share this presentation with you when we're finished.
Allison, will you say again how to populate the date?
I sure will. The button just underneath the escape button on the keyboard, it looks like a backwards apostrophe. If I hit that one twice, it will auto-populate with today's date. Yeah, that one.
And Tara, will you answer how come the DLD tells students that they haven't entered the information when they know that they have?
As far as I know, I don't deal with DEMS very much, so I've got Coulter and Sharon on IAM here with me. For some reason, it's a syncing issue. So if that happens, they're supposed to be going in and looking at it, but sometimes it doesn't get sent. So even though you guys have entered it, it's not syncing with the DLD system. So they should be able to go out, and the examiners, and this is one thing that we're working on, is that the examiners should be able to go out and pull it to see if it's been entered or not. So I know that Sharon and Coulter were working on that recently to get the newer examiners in the offices to remember to go out and do that sometimes.
Another problem that might be happening that's causing that is that we've got a double, you've got a double record. So for example, Andrew here, he is not linked in his top record, but he is linked in his bottom record. His top record is probably his classroom portion. And he probably took it at East Shore Online through Alpine School District, which is a different company than Lone Peak High School. Then he did his road instruction, behind the wheel training, observation, and testing at Lone Peak. And his Lone Peak instructor probably didn't find his record by driver license number. He probably found them by typing in their name and their birth date, and a record did not come up for whatever reason, a spelling error or a birth date error. And so both the classroom instructor and the road instructor think they have put all of that information into DEMS, and the other person just needs to go in and put in their piece of information. Well, no, they're both in there. They're just in separate records. And so it's really, really, really important that we hit the link button so that the student only has one record and that it has everything. It also does it by hitting the space bar. Oh, Randy, great, that's good. And inside the date, if you hit the space bar, it looks like it auto-populates with the date. Okay, so I'm going back to where we were with that completion document. I don't actually print this off and give it to students usually because the student doesn't care and the driver license division won't accept it. It is a good way to prove that classroom training, observation training behind the wheel, and the testing has been entered into that student's record. So sometimes I'll print it in a PDF and email it to the kids. Sometimes I actually print it. But there is one form, one document that you absolutely have to give to your student. I'm going to try really hard to get through this real quick. You're only going to create a new record if the student does not yet have a permit and you administered a written permit test to them and they passed the test. If they didn't pass the test, don't create a new record and don't enter that test score into DEMS. So you're going to go back again to our query. You're going to hit, you're going to put in their last name, their date of birth. Their driver license number won't be there yet, so don't put that in their first name, and hit the submit button. And then no record will be found, and you're going to hit the add a new student button. At this point, it'll take you here and it will auto-populate what you've already entered, and it will create a driver license number for them. It will also put in the active date, and then you're going to hit save. You can go into the exams tab now. You can type in their select from the drop down their type of exam. Make sure you give your name as the instructor and enter their score. The score is out of 100 on that. 80% is required for passing. Do not enter a test that is failed. If you enter a test that's failed, you can't add another one. And then you're going to go back to the student tab. So click back on that student tab, click on knowledge test document, and it will give you a certificate. I don't have an example because I didn't have anybody that I could find from my classes that I actually gave a permit test to. But you have to print that out, sign it, and let them take it to the driver license division. That way, if you spelled their name wrong or put in a wrong birth date for some reason, the driver license people have a number they can use to find that kid in their system. If you don't do that, the student's probably going to have to retake the test at the driver license division, because whatever mistake I made as I entered that data, the driver license division is going to be unable to recreate the same mistake. Okay, and there's our emails for questions. I'm going to go back to the chat box and answer chat questions until it's time for the next presenter to start. So thanks, everybody. It's weird to present like this, by the way. It's really weird.
Allison, the next speaker actually doesn't start for 10 more minutes. So if you want to keep answering questions, that's fine. So Sharon answered the question about if they push the verify button, it'll tell them whether or not the record was sent over to driver's licensing office. Okay, so using the verify button is really important, and the link button is also very important.
Yeah. Esther, it looks like you're having trouble. What are you talking about with still no results? Jesse Roberts, you asked about straight line back in a parking lot or on the side of the road. You need to do it somewhere where it's safe. So if the side of the road is in a residential neighborhood with a wide enough road somebody can get around you, then you can do it on the side of the road. If it's not, I have pulled into a parking lot when we're on a busy road with no great shoulder. We still treat the parking lot like we're on a road, and we pull over against the curb and we back up there. Can you take a picture of your computer screen and text that to the student? For the certificate information, probably. The driver license division doesn't accept just those certificates anymore. They'll use the data on those to find the kid in their system. But we all know kids are way too savvy with Photoshop, and they'll try to create their own thing. So unless the driver license division can guarantee that it is what it says it is. They're not going to just take that from the kid. So PDF and texting to the kid, that's probably acceptable.
One of the questions, there was a question about observation. There was a new law, House Bill 18, that came out this year that did not require observation hours anymore. And that is for private companies. It does not affect public schools at all. So you guys are still required to do observation time, and you always have those students in the car because you shouldn't be in the car by yourself. So you're going to have the extra students and rotate them and have observation the same as you always have. That law and code did not affect public schools, just private schools.
Right. Okay, Esther, I'm back at your question in the Q&A. I just entered the student driver license, no results. I entered the name and birth date with no results. I've seen the permit, no name appears in the results. I'm using my phone. It's possible that the permit number you have is incorrect. So I would get the actual permit and read it off the top of the permit to make sure. Sharon can probably help you. She says there's 3 ways to check on a record, either by student number or name and date of birth or their permit number. You don't need all 3, just one of them. The student number is not the student's student number at their school. It's a student number generated by DEMS. And I've had a hard time finding that unless I already have the student record. But I'm happy to work with you, Esther. If you want to email me, we can set up a time to screen share and I can help you with that question. Okay, and that's the end of my slides. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, and I'm going to go back into the chat again.
The number of observation hours is not changed. It's still 6.
Yeah. David Fletcher asked me if I could take oh, never mind. Sorry, I was only half reading that. Nathan, so you ask about having to park in between 2 parking stalls or test to backing up. Okay, 90-degree parking is not part of the Utah State driver test. What is on that test is determined by the Utah State Legislature, and they have chosen in their infinite wisdom to not include 90-degree parking. So backing out of a parking stall is possibly an acceptable way to get their backing done. However, they don't have to park in a stall as part of their test. So the driver training handbook that I have from the driver license division says you got to pull over to the right side of the road, turn on your signal, head check, pull over safely, stop, don't coast. And then, you know, put the car in reverse and turn around and look behind you and back up 30 feet or whatever it is. I don't know I don't remember all of the steps, but that handbook does tell us specifically to be on the side of the road. So it's not backing out of a driveway or backing out of a parking space. Oh, thank you guys for saying thanks. I'm happy to help anytime. You're always welcome to call or email me, and I'll be happy to help you. It looks like Tara says, no, we don't use parking to test our backing. So I'm going to stick around for a little bit until our next presenter starts. So if you have questions, feel free. Otherwise, my email address is aterry@alpinedistrict.org, and I'm happy to help any way I can.
Allison, did you have a slide that had Sharon's information on it?
I did. Do you want me to go back to that?
Yeah, put it up for a little bit.
Yeah, let's share my screen and go back. There we go. Okay, we got a bunch of questions in the Q&A. Oh yeah, Sharon says to call. Sharon, do you remember, can you tell us your phone number? I don't have it on my slide. Maybe put it in the chat. Tracy, if you want to go over, if you find a problem like that and you want to go over one specifically, let me know. I'm happy to help you. Okay, Sharon put her phone number in the Q&A. It's 801-450-8366.
Allison and Audra, can you guys add Coulter to your contact information? He is Sharon's partner, so that if you can't get a hold of Sharon, Coulter I can also do everything that Sharon can do.
Yes, if you can tell me his name and number, Coulter's name and number, that would be great.
Yeah, I will send that. I'll put that in the chat.
Okay, great. I'm going to add that to my phone so I can add it to my next thing as well. Tara, what's Coulter's email?
I'll put that on all of that in the chat so everybody can see it if they want to.
Perfect. Thank you. EALBES at
Oh, there it is. Culture.
801 957 85. Awesome. Thanks, Sharon.
Allison, this is Terry. Great job. Thank you for presenting that and,
Oh, you're
and
welcome.
working with us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome. Anytime. I hope I didn't lead anyone astray.
Well, no, you did it. You did great. Thank you.
Welcome. A lot of the screenshots that I shared with you in here will also be in the new examiners course. So if you have questions or you don't remember where the link button is or something, we can help anybody out with that who might need it. Yes.
I had a few different people ask to see this training again so they could go through it. In about, our new course will be done at the end of this week. So in 2 weeks, we'll be sending out training for everyone. You guys will have specific training for DEMS and the road skills test. Everyone will have it. So you'll be getting specific training on everything that Allison just did in a bulked up version.
Yeah. And if you want to, I will send this PowerPoint in a Google Drive version. It won't have me talking over it, but because you can't apparently do that in Google Drive, it's fine. But I will send this to Audra and then she can send the link out maybe in the next newsletter or something. Sharon, yeah, it's weird when you're like, we don't use this, so we don't really know how it works, but we're the ones who are supposed to train you on it. Yeah, I've been there. So. Okay, well, it looks like the questions have kind of stopped.